Starring Maika Monroe as Lee Harker, a detective with some kind of supernatural intuition, instincts that come in handy with this job, like a tap on the shoulder telling her where to look, what to see, or sometimes what not to see. In a thrilling, uneasy story of a serial killer in a cold case that as soon as Harker joins the investigation, gets blown sky high. I need to start off this video by saying that both performances to me are Oscar worthy, and I truly believe that. I think Maika Monroe gives maybe my favourite performance of the year, and Nicolas Cage brings his A-game as always, and manages to bring a sense of intentional comedy to the character, whilst also just being freaky as hell and totally unhinged. Longlegs has had a lot of people talking, and for good reason. It is absolutely great to see the film do so well. It's Neon's biggest opening, a record that it broke itself a couple months back with Immaculate, and then did it again when this movie came out. I think it's now crossed $100 million at the box office on a budget of under 10 million. It's great to see my favourite genre getting the love that it quite frankly deserves, and doesn't get all that often. Horror has made its way into the limelight a little bit more recently, with Five Nights at Freddy's last year doing really well, as much as I wasn't a big fan of the movie. And then this year there's a lot of great horror going on. Aliens doing really well, Immaculate like I said. And by the way, this film is under $10 million and looks amazing. It's shot so well and so memorably and has incredible visual storytelling, which I think we see less and less of in movies now, if I'm honest. I love how the scenes set in the past have the changed aspect ratio. There's actually a moment later in the film where Lee has been subdued and she's waking up and kind of rolling across the bed, and as she's waking up we transition from the past into the present, with that aspect ratio actually widening, and it's one of my favourite moments in the movie. It's so good. There's a sequence in Harker's house too at the end of the first act where all the shots are just making you get ready to jump. Like, it's framed with doorways in the background or windows, and that like you're waiting to see someone walk past or jump out at you. It's making you look in the corners of every shot, a constant state of just anxiety. And I think the first act of the film is probably the scariest, especially that first scene. It's terrifying. There are two great jump scares in it, and it takes the time to establish the location. This one house covered in snow with no sign of any civilization nearby except for this arriving car. It's awesome, instant kind of state of isolation. Love it. One of my favourite scenes maybe ever. Lee Harker is such a fascinating character, and she clearly feels kind of outside of everyone else's world. Quite an awkward individual, possibly due to this sixth sense that she's got going on that she doesn't even understand herself. It reminded me a little bit of The Shining, actually, like the ability, I mean. It's just something that she's always had, and so has learnt to live with it, but has no real idea what it is, actually. When Lee meets Agent Carter's daughter, who is an underrated character in this film, by the way, and the actor does a phenomenal job, when she meets his daughter, they seem to get on through the fact they're both quite awkward and aren't sure how to handle such social situations. Like the way when she asks Lee to come and see her room and she just kind of seems a bit lost looking to her parents for help. This is a really cool detail as well, with how they both seem so similar, and then how it all circles back right at the end, in that final scene with Harker and the Carter family. Getting a little bit too ahead of myself here though. The entire mystery is just really intriguing on a conceptual level and in the execution. As soon as kind of we're introduced to the case and Harker and her partner go out to do what they've been told, it immediately kind of subverts your expectations, because as soon as the doors open that they knock on, her partner just gets absolutely shot through the fucking skull. It's a great jump scare, first of all, and immediately gets you intrigued, invested, and want to know what the fuck is going on. Learning more about the case, it always seems to be the father that kills their family and then themselves. Longlegs leaves notes, but in his own writing, so they have to be decoded every time, but there's also never any evidence of him actually entering the building. Somehow he's making someone in the house commit these crimes without ever actually doing anything himself. It is just a utterly intriguing concept, and brings me to the supernatural element of the film. I had no idea that it was going to be supernatural at all. In fact, I kind of just had assumed that it wouldn't be. I don't know, the trailers all just seemed like a grounded horror movie, which are always the most scary for me. And I think on my first watch, I was so taken aback by that and how interestingly it's integrated. So much so that it didn't totally click for me. I loved it, and it was still a 5-star movie on my first watch, but there was just a little bit that I didn't fully click with until a rewatch, and I was like, it's there from the start, and I think knowing kind of how it goes just made it a bit more understandable, I suppose. but it is there from the get-go. The film shows these elements by creating feelings that we have had or know, and that's what keeps it grounded. It feels like a really realistic interpretation of like supernatural stuff, and it makes this world feel so much more unique, and I think that's why I liked it more the second time. And now, we have to talk about Longlegs himself. The man, the myth, the legend. Nicolas Cage disappears in this role, as he often does. He's giving 110% as he always is. He's got the aura of kind of a loon, but manages to feel truly evil and unsettling all at the same time.
There she is.
As much as we can look at some of the things he does and kind of laugh at it and just think, what a fucking weirdo, which is absolutely the intention. If you see that scene where he's like talking to the girl serving him, like that's a scene straight from a comedy, but also really I'd be terrified. But I think when you kind of figure out everything that's going on as well, and the thematics of the movie, it makes the childish nature scary as well. It's him attempting to be normal to children, playing with them in his own satanic way, because yes, Longlegs is a big grade A Satanist who has literally given all his faith to the devil, has literally dedicated his life to it, to the point his appearance is of a heavy metal, like satanic rock group member, like all that stereotype. Clearly the plastic surgery he's had over the years was botched, but you can see the initial idea, and with the film being set in the 1990s as well, a time where the idea of cultists and Satan worshippers were more prevalent, I think, and more scary to people. Not that it's not scary now, and it allows the film to work well with that backstory. We see in his little basement he has posters of like these rock artists and like these stereotypes that you'd associate with the occult. I think there's even a poster of Marilyn Manson in there, and all of this is never explicitly said. We're never told this. This film does show, not tell, incredibly well, which I think is something we're seeing less and less of in movies, if I'm honest. But now this is where the supernatural stuff really comes into play, because there's an actual manifestation of the devil in this movie. On multiple occasions, a shadow figure can be seen somewhere in the frame, clearly resembling something tall with curved horns, and as we go on through the movie, each appearance becomes more noticeable, indicating the closer Harker gets to Longlegs, the more his plan is coming together, the more his influence is overshadowing the events that we're witnessing. Even if he's not there, as he says, he's a little bit of everywhere. This does lead to the film taking a bit of a tone change from a more focused crime thriller to a more metaphysical, devilish horror, but I think Ozgood Perkins fuses these two tones really effectively. Even if on my first watch I was a bit jarred by it, that was more due to expectations, because I had built a lot of expectations for this film, because the marketing was incredible. Some of the best marketing I've seen for a movie ever. I love the trailers, they're great. All the posters are works of art, and some really creative stuff as well, like the heartbeat monitor advertisement they did was awesome, mixed with the word of mouth being really good as well, created this massive expectation in my head. And whilst I still loved it on my first viewing, on a second I was just so much more able to see how the two tones fused together and complemented each other, and how intentional every little thing is to make it all come together by the end. It reminded me of Hereditary in that sense, in how the movie goes from vaguely spooky happenings to a full-blown demonic possession right at the end, even including a head smash and all, which is one of my favourite horror tropes that's seemingly happening more and more. But I have to say, and very possibly this is just recency bias, but I think Longlegs handles it more interestingly. There's a definite moment where we shift into more of one than the other, but throughout the rest of the runtime, they're just complementing each other.
Here is my take on Longlegs as a non-horror fan.
Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo.
To start off, one of the things that really caught my attention was just the acting. Acting in films never really stand out for me. I look at usually how it's put together, the directing and the shots. But yeah, Longlegs' acting was brilliant. Backing up to Jack's point, Maika Monroe's performance was really engaging. As soon as I saw her on the screen, you could just tell that she was absolutely riddled with anxiety and some sort of PTSD. And you kind of felt that within yourself when you watched her. Right from the beginning, you sort of gathered that she had some sort of sociopathic tendencies. Just the way that she's mostly in a neutral state, especially when she's talking to Agent Carter. She's clearly there just for for business and wants to crack on with the case and try to find Longlegs. She just has no time to be friendly with anyone. She can go from 0 to 100 really quickly and be absolutely petrified. And I just think that unpredictability is what makes her character really good. Anyway, moving on to the cinematography of this film, which is really, really good. I love the way that it occasionally animates from 4:3 to 60:9, just as a way to show flashbacks and show a leap in time. But probably one of my favourite things in this film was the use of framing, where there's empty space on one side of the shot and you just think that something's going to come out any minute now and just absolutely scare you. It's a common technique in classic horror films. There were a couple shots in this film that really stood out to me that did this technique. This shot has a point of entry where you just think Longlegs is going to come out in the corner of the room and jump scare the hell out of you. But obviously he doesn't. Most of the time he doesn't. But the way it's framed just makes you feel that way, and it's so unsettling. There are so many shots like this that really got me. I think that's why I found this film really scary, was just how it was shot. And it's crazy how such a simple technique like this can make such an effect on the audience. And I know what I've explained sounds an awful lot like what Jack's been explaining, but this just backs up the point that these techniques are being noticed and they do work. I thoroughly enjoyed this film and I'm glad I went out of my way to watch it. It makes me feel excited to see what's next for modern horror films. And coming from someone who doesn't really watch horror films, I'll just 100% recommend it to anyone. Ignore the letterbox reviews, ignore them. It gives you a good scare, but the story's really engaging, so that's what keeps you on your seat. But yeah, his legs just weren't that very long, were they?
Charlie, as usual, bringing the big brain points to the operation, but that one letterbox user I'm sure I've seen before with a few poor reviews. I love the themes of the film as well and how they're integrated. The idea of faith being weaponized against you, your own faith. Obviously it's revealed that Harker's mom was the accomplice to Longlegs the whole time, but not necessarily out of her wanting to be. She is seriously religious, and Longlegs is obviously on the other end of that spectrum, being a massive Satanist. And so he uses her to take like his dolls, which then I think it is left up to your imagination a bit, but my kind of interpretation is that these dolls have a little bit of like devil magic in them, and that's what twists the fathers or whoever. And the fact that it's dolls as well is what links it to the other theme of the movie, being kind of the perception of the world when you're a child. You never really understand the world until you're on your own and you're grown up. You only see the world how the people around you want you to see it when you're older, and that's presented with how her mother was the accomplice and she had no idea, and the fact that Longlegs actually lived in her house. And again, like I say, that also links back to Longlegs' actual characteristics and how he talks to people, especially younger people. That interrogation scene as well is absolutely amazing, and the way it parallels Harker and Longlegs throughout the movie, absolutely love it. And I love how the film leaves you. It leaves you wondering who won. I personally kind of think Longlegs. I mean, everyone in that house died except for her and Carter's daughter, making his plan still all come together. And throughout the rest of the movie, everything that was going on was exactly how he wanted it to happen, and I don't think that's any different after he died. Longlegs is a phenomenal movie, and I can't wait to probably come back to it at a later date when it comes out on physical. Without too much doubt, my favourite movie of the year so far.
It seems I wore my long legs today.